Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the webinar for South African National Standard 21001, or like we call it 20001, which was published in 2020. It is a quality management system for the educational organizations and a management system for with requirements and guidance of use. This management system will be introduced today to you by a team of experts, and we have got in the room today 3 esteemed speakers from educational institutions, and but all from higher educational institutions. But first of all, we're going to introduce you to the SABS, and I'm going to go through a quick round of introductions of our speakers for the day. The first one will be Dr. Sadhvir Bassoon, and I asked Dr. Sadhvir to put on his camera and just introduce himself to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Helene Temple. My name is Sadhvir Bassoon, and I'm the executive for the Standards Division. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and talk a bit about the SABS with specific reference on the role of the national standards body in developing South African national standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadhvir. The next gentleman I would like to introduce is Mr. David Stables. Mr. David Stables, if you can put on your camera. David is the chairperson of our Technical Committee 176 for Quality Management Systems. David, if you can just give us a quick introduction of yourself.
Thank you very much, Helene, and thank you for the opportunity. As Helene said, my name is David Stables. I've been in the quality management field. I think we count it in decades now rather than years. And I've also been in the higher education system for over 26 years. And my heart is quite close to quality management systems, and particularly ISO 9001 and this one, 21001. Thank you, Helene.
Thank you very much, David. Our next speaker will be Prof. Roy Rampal from UNISA. And Prof. Roy, if you can put on your camera and introduce yourself, please. Just unmute for us, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. It's Roy Rampal here. I've had 20 years experience in industry. I was one of the pioneers of implementing ISO 9001 in 1987, and I have more than 25 years experience in academia, in quality, looking at quality of learning, as well as quality assurance and quality of research. So my present position in the SBL as a quality assurance and enhancement manager. I'm also the president of the Southern African Society for Quality, where we promote quality to standards, and I'm excited to be here so that we can also learn from 21001 and take it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Roy. Our last speaker for the day, which will not only be a speaker, but will actually look at what the other speakers have said and give us a comprehensive summary of the what has been said. A moderated summary is Prof. Humphrey Mogashau. And Prof. Humphrey, if you can please put on your camera and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Ms. Temple. I am Humphrey Mogashau. I am a professor at UNISA. I'm a Director of Academic Quality Assurance and Enhancement in the Office of the Vice Principal Teaching and Learning. I'm looking forward to this engagement, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The speaker, you can now close your camera. we're going to start to keep to time, and I'm going to ask Dr. Sadhvir Pisoon to take us through an introduction to the SABS and the standards development process. And I would like to just also say that Prof. Rampal and Prof. Mr. Stables has been working with us for many years. And so if you think we are all very familiar to each other, yes, we are. And it's a team of us presenting this to you. Dr. Pisoon, please.
Thank you, Helene. So I trust colleagues, you can hear me. Helene, just to confirm that.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the South African Bureau of Standards and with specific reference to the national standards body and the work that we do. So just going to try and move my slides, which appears at this stage to be stalling. Okay, great. That's much better. So the South African Bureau of Standards has basically been around for the past 75 years. This year we celebrate our 75th anniversary, and to the month, which was September, where we acknowledge our standardization activities for the past 7.5 decades, both at the international level, regional level, and more importantly, at the national level. So the SABS is basically legislated by mandate according to the Standards Act, and the recent act promulgated was of 2008. We fall within the Directorate for the Government Department of Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, and fall within the Directorate of the SQUAM Directorate, and the acronym thereof is Standards Quality Assurance Accreditation and Metrology. So basically the SABS is the national standards body of South Africa. Our key mandate is to develop, promote and maintain South African national standards. We're also responsible for promoting quality with respect to commodities, products, services for the domestic and export markets. And we also provide conformity assessment services, and there are a wide range of conformity assessment services, which includes certification services, laboratory services, local content verification, inspection, training, etc. Now there are 4 other departments or 4 other entities that form part of the SQUAM technical infrastructure. The first being NRCS, the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications. As quite rightly points out, it is a regulator and it administers regulations to ensure compliance with specific aspects of protection of health and safety and environmental protection. Then we have SANS, which is the National Accreditation System. This body is responsible to officially make sure that bodies that provide certification services, testing services, etc., have the right competencies and infrastructure in place, so they become accredited to provide these services. And lastly but not least, NAMISA, which is the National Metrology Institute of South Africa, and they're responsible for calibration through measurement, accuracy, and measurement traceability. All these 4 entities are individually legislated to provide their core functions. They work very closely with each other to ensure the efficient functioning of the economy. So specifically in terms of the services of the SABS, our core mandate is to develop South African national standards. We are the only entity in South Africa that develops South African national standards, and every national standards in every country has a national standards body. And therefore we have a very good collaborative relationship with the 165 national standards bodies who are members of the International Organization for Standardization, where we could share best practice on standards and standards solutions as well. We also provide access of South African national standards and international standards. Just bear in mind, standards are not for free, they're copyright protected, and we need to adhere to the copyrights and protection thereof. I mentioned earlier, there's a wide, diverse range of laboratory services and testing services that the SABS offers. We are the local content verification authority in South Africa, mandated by the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. We provide training services, and these training services are specifically around management system standards, typically your ISO 9000, ISO 14000, ISO 45000, etc., which supports the certification business of the SABS. There's also an element of consignment inspection, whereby we go in and inspect consignment of goods, and specifically the focus is currently on government department procurement of consignments. We also provide certification, product and system certification, and these portfolio of services fall within the commercial side of the SABS. So just to give you a brief snapshot of the global objectives coming down to the national objectives and how we work. South Africa is a signatory of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and there's objectives and ambitions of projects and programs that need to be implemented from a South African perspective to achieve the goals 2030. Each government department has been allocated a project or two, or a portfolio of programs that are aligned to achieving all 17 goals and address the goals to achieve these by within the 10-year period. That's from a global perspective. From a national perspective, we have our National Development Plan, and the National Development Plan is underpinned by 9 pillars, key pillars that we want to address, which addresses 2 fundamental issues from a national perspective, addressing poverty and inequality. In addition to that, we are responsible for ensuring that we support the industrialization ambitions of the country. So the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition has identified the reinvigorated industrial priority sectors, and this provides an indication of the various sectors that have been earmarked towards supporting local industrialization, including mining, agriculture and agro-processing, industrial sector, tourism, high-tech sectors, defense, aerospace, oceans economy, and the creative sector. So this provides an indication of the enormity of the tasks that the SABS has to provide to support both the public and private sector in developing national solutions in the sense of South African national standards, which provide knowledge and solutions to address these wide variety of projects and programs aligned to national priorities. This is all done as part of our technical committee structures and the scopes of our technical committees, the technical committee strategic business plans, the leadership and influence at international level, leadership as well as regional level, and more importantly at national level, where a diverse range of stakeholders, experts in their own right, participate and contribute towards the technical solutions referred to as South African national standards. Okay, so I'm trying to just move. Okay, great. So we did a very brief mapping exercise between the National Development Plan, all 9 pillars, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And you could see that there's a strong level of alignment between the National Development Plan. Quite, importantly, if you look at Too Few Jobs as one of the National Development Plan pillars, how does this line up and stack up with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? It certainly looks at Development Goal 1, 2, or addresses Development Goal 1, 2, and 8, no poverty, zero hunger, decent work and economic growth. So all these pillars, as defined by the NDP, has a very good and close alignment to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So if we have projects and programs aligned to the NDP, certainly we will be addressing global perspectives as well. And there's one critical element as part of our NDP, which is poor education. And this is aligned to equal education, which is goal number 4 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this is certainly the topic of discussion today. During this webinar, we will get some key insights on the 21001 South African National Standard as adopted from ISO. Just want to make some inference to the World Standards Day. So on the 14th of October, it's an annual event whereby the world standards, international standards bodies, including the national standards bodies, celebrate the World Standards Day. The theme for this year is protecting the planet with standards. And basically you would see the poster, and this is the winning poster from the Bureau of Indian Standards. They have submitted and they have basically were awarded with the winning poster. But the three international organizations, ISO, IEC, and ITU, these are instrumental in celebrating the aspects of World Standards Day, especially aligned to the theme and projecting the solutions and deliverables that they have delivered over the last couple of decades in terms of addressing the issues of protecting the planet. Certainly from a national standards body perspective, we are very grateful to have the caliber of experts. And this is one of the fundamental objects of World Standards Day, is to embrace the technical experts that participate on a voluntary basis at their own accord, time, and the amount of effort, dedication, and commitment they put towards the development of South African national standards. And we certainly salute the team that have been instrumental in developing standards for the past 7.5 decades in providing technical solutions to national priorities. So a brief review of the current scope of work of our technical committees, specifically aligned to this current theme this year, which is protecting the planet with standards. If we have to look at the various UN SDGs that are aligned to this particular theme this year, you would see that SDG 6, 7, 13, 14, 15, 9, 12, and 11 are just a few of the examples that come in very closely to addressing solutions around climate change and protecting the planet. I've also included a snapshot of the various technical committees. SABS administers and provides the governing structure of more than 300 technical committees and subcommittees, traversing a very wide and diverse range of topics and development of solutions around the scopes of these technical committees. So as an example, if you have to look at the industry, innovation and infrastructure, goal 9, you would see that we have a technical committee and various subcommittees around construction standards, structural and geotechnical design. If you'll have to look at other scopes, including affordable and clean energy, the solutions derived in technical committees include energy efficiency, electricity distribution, smart grids, alternative fuel vehicles, energy storage, intelligent transport systems, facilities management, smart communities. So it's pretty diverse range of work that we do in our technical committees that provides these solutions. Just lastly, just to highlight life on land as an example, we talk about solutions within the scope of security and resilience, and I think we all know a lot about that in the recent pandemic and the solutions that had to be put in place, specifically around management systems, including product specifications as well, around PPE, etc., that we had to pivot and start working differently in our environment. And how do we work differently in a very changing and evolving ecosystem? And standards needs to embrace that as well. So technical committees around carbon capture, transport, storage, nature conservation, energy management, air quality are pretty diverse range of solutions within these scopes that we provide to both the public and private sector. I would also want to just highlight a few of the management system standards. So a lot of you would be aware of ISO 9000, SANS ISO 9001, SANS ISO 14001, and you would see the acronym SANS is a South African national standard. Why we have SANS? Because as a member of ISO, we adopt these international standards and we are allocated a dual numbering, meaning that we have taken an international standard and now we've domesticated it to address national imperatives. So you would see all our publications would be SANS, and if it's adopted from ISO or IEC, it will have a /ISO or a /IEC according to the nomenclature that ISO and IEC has. So there are a number of management system standards that address and aligned to, once again, to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And over the recent past, we have had the opportunity to go out and present and host a number of webinars around these management system standards, in particular reference to the areas that we have seen quite a number of challenges, specifically in reference to the COVID-19 pandemic. As an example, we had a webinar on the occupational health and safety management system, the business continuity management system, SANS 22301. We had a very insightful webinar on anti-bribery management system. This is a very common word, bribery, corruption, that we see and hear of on a daily basis. And we have a management system standard that has been published by ISO and adopted by South African Bureau of Standards as SANS 37001. And it's a management system aligned to the principles and concepts of 9001, can be put as an integrated structure in various management systems already implemented, and provides tools and solutions of how we could address anti-bribery within the context of the ecosystem in South Africa. And lastly, our hosting today of the Educational Organization Management System, which is SANS 21001. I think further to emphasize the importance of standards in the public sector, private sector, and the consumer, standards basically reflects the state of art and serves as a vehicle for the dissemination of new technologies, innovative practices, facilitates trade, which is one of the very clear articulated roles of standards in terms of movement of goods and services between countries, between regions, etc., and the global movement of these goods and services, and certainly supports industrialization objectives as well. Our deliverables also support the technical aspects of societal and environmental policies and contribute to sustainable development. So this means that the policymakers, government departments, ministries, etc., as well as the regulators, have the opportunity to look at our standards, adopt our standards, and reference our standards as part of their solutions to achieve a technical policy or regulatory objective. And this is very fundamental to our engagement with the public sector. It also offers a wide range of tools for the various conformity assessment services that we provide as the SABS, and various other conformity assessment bodies that operate in the environment in South Africa as well. What it does is that it provides an enhanced confidence in products, systems, processes, and acknowledgement of personnel as well. From a consumer perspective, it certainly increases the way of making informed buying decisions by the consumer. The consumer has the opportunity to determine fit-for-purpose products and services, and allows them the choice to determine which products they see that will meet their requirements. So quite simply, standards are knowledge, and they represent an agreed way of considering a current or potential issue. And the issue could be either a challenge in the marketplace, or more importantly, an opportunity in the marketplace. It provides a wide variety of deliverables. It could be a requirement document, a specification, a guideline, a management system document like the 21001 we're discussing today, and basic or characteristics that allows for consistent ensuring that materials, products, and processes are fit for purpose. I would also like to emphasize that standards that published by the South African Bureau of Standards as South African National Standards are for voluntary application. This is very important to understand, and we'll get to the little more detail in the slide to follow. We are members of ISO and IEC, and we certainly develop our standards aligned to international best practice. So standards are not regulations, meaning the outputs delivered by the SABS. We ensure that regulatory authorities work as closely as possible with the SABS in our technical committees, whereby they could use our standards and reference our standards as part of their solutions. Regulatory authorities should endeavour to apply and reference our standards that respect the voluntary nature. So the SABS does not have a regulatory mandate, and quite rightly so as well. We are developing solutions for a self-regulatory mechanism in the marketplace. Regulations and the implementation and the enforcement of regulations comes with a particular solution that needs to be met in the marketplace, either market failure of the use of particular requirements or standards, or it has a safety and health concern that needs to be addressed, or environmental concern that needs to be addressed in the marketplace. We constantly track the number of standards that are referenced in the national and local legislation, and to date we have in excess of 1,100 South African national standards that are referenced in national and local regulations that serve to meet the objectives of the policy and regulatory stakeholders. Just to provide you with an overview of the principles that we need to abide by. So I mentioned we're members of ISO and IEC, and we need to develop standards in an open, transparent, transparent principle, make sure that our standards are market relevant. It has to go through due process, coherence. Consensus is key to what we do, which is general agreement within the committee members themselves. And we try as far as possible to make sure we have an extensive stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder balance is something that's not very easily achieved, because majority of the stakeholders in our technical committees are mainly industry representatives, because they are the major uptake and users of our South African national standards. However, there's a fair share of representation of government departments, labour, academia. Academia certainly do play a very important role as individual experts participating in our technical committees. There's an element of small, medium and micro enterprises participating as well, and to a lesser extent NGOs and consumer bodies as well. So we try as far as possible to encourage these various stakeholder groupings to participate in our technical committees and develop national standards so that the process could be as inclusive as possible. So the engine of the development of national standards is the experts, as I pointed out earlier. SABS provides the governance and the administration of the process and the rules and procedures of how to develop national standards, but the experts from the various stakeholder groups are responsible for the technical input that needs to go to in the national standards. So as members of ISO and IEC, SABS, as working very closely with the experts and participating in these international forums, have the opportunity to influence, firstly, the international standards, to develop these international standards, and secondly, has the opportunity to adopt these international standards. We try as far as possible to adopt them identically, but where there are opportunities and peculiarities in terms of climatic changes, technological disadvantages or changes, as well as geographical differences, we have the opportunity to change the standards and adopt them accordingly as modified adoptions. At a regional level, this is a very important role that is going to be evolving very closely with the support of the African Continental Free Trade Area. As you're very well aware, the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area has kickstarted, and the various signatories, all 55 member countries, have a responsibility to ensure that programs, projects are driven to allow for the ease and of movements of goods and services between the 54 member countries in the continent. There are a number of regional standards bodies, but two key ones in that are ultimately responsible for the development and harmonization of standards within the 54 member countries is ARSO, the African Organization for Standardization, and AFSEC, which is the African Electrotechnical Standardization Commission. SABS participates quite rigorously in all of these technical committees of these regional standards bodies to develop regional harmonized texts and documents, and this will allow for the support of the Continental Free Trade Area. We are also members of the BRICS Standardization Forum, the Pacific Area Standards Congress, and the Commonwealth Standards Network, which is the multilateral stakeholder engagement on sharing of best practice, not necessarily developing standards for the regions, but sharing of best practice and supporting each other in terms of driving specific agendas at ISO and IEC. At a national level, we have publication or a catalogue of more than 7,500 standards. Annually, we publish about 250 standards. Committees, we have more than 300 committees, and the expertise in excess of 1,700 experts participating in our technical committees. Don't want to go into detail around the development process, but just to highlight that there are 6 development processes aligned to international best practice that we engage with, and it's a step-by-step process for the development of international standards to ensure that we abide by those various principles as highlighted in the previous slides, and there's a significant element of consensus and inclusivity. The first step is when there's a preliminary, refers to as a PWI, preliminary item, whereby a request could come from a technical committee an expert or an individual or a citizen submits this proposal. This proposal is subsequently evaluated within the technical committee, and if it's endorsed by the technical committee based on the relevance of this proposal, it is approved by the approvals committee and subsequently goes into a preparatory stage, which includes a working draft, and this is a working group of technical experts that develop the technical content. It then goes to a round of committee stages, which is the technical committee or the subcommittee, depending on the scope of the committees, to develop consensus. And finally, once consensus is reached within the technical committee, it goes out on the public inquiry process. And this is very important to appreciate, is that every document that goes out as a public inquiry means that every single citizen has the opportunity to comment on that draft South African standard, which is referred to as DSS. And we take those comments, it's out for a period of 60 days, and it's a legal requirement. It's further gazetted as well. And we take those comments, and those comments are addressed by the technical committee, secretariat and the chair. And once those comments have been addressed adequately and is due for publication, the document is subsequently published. And that's basically a brief overview of the process of developing national standards. We also have been very strongly engaged around education about standardization. And we feel that the amount of work that is in, especially we've been focusing on the tertiary institutions, that focuses on standardization is minimal and can be matured and strengthened, because I think there are a few modules or courses disparately engaged with various other courses or degrees that relate to something about trade agreements. But fundamentally, how do standards provide the benefits, and how do standards play a significant role in trade and trade agreements? I think that's very poorly articulated, or not even articulated and transmitted to the tertiary institutions. Secondly, how do standards support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? And that is key to the global agenda. And how do we take that as part of a module or course, etc., or discussion point in tertiary institutions? How do standards support the government and regulatory regimes or ecosystem, and play a very important role in effective governance in various economies? And lastly, the economic benefits of standards. There have been several cases, even published by the SABS, on the microeconomic benefits of standards at a company level, and how can this be taught or introduced as a course or a module at tertiary institutions. So we've been engaging quite rigorously over the last couple of months to reinvigorate our engagement around education about standardization. And there's a guideline on teaching standards, which as we engage with institutions, we provide these guidelines. And specific to this is our recent publication of 2020, which is Educational Organizations Management System for Educational Organization Requirements with Guidance for Use, which is the ISO 21001, recently adopted as a South African national standard. And this standard addresses at least 3 key elements within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we will continue quite rigorously to engage with tertiary institutions. I must say that UNISA SBL we've been engaging with them for a number of years. We've concretized our establishment and an agreement to the effect that UNISA has a management development program specifically around standards and standardization issues, and we try and take that and emulate that in other institutions as well. And I think that's basically where I'll end my presentation. Thank you, Helene, and I trust we'll take questions and comments later in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sadhvir. I think you gave us a very, very good overview of the standards development process, why we are there, and why we actually take part in the development of international standards. I would like to now move over to the real crux of why are we here today. We are here today to look at the SANS 21001 Educational Organization Standard, a quality management system that is developed specifically for educational institutions, whether it is at tertiary level or at higher educational level. It is there to make sure that the customers, and who are the customers? The learners, the beneficiaries, the Department of Education. Those are the people. David is going to tell us all about that today. And I'm going to introduce David now. David has been, as he said, more than 26 years in higher education already. David has done his master's degree in the development of a quality management system for educational institutions. So what was first? Was it first David's master's thesis, or was it first the start of the development of SANS 21001? David will have to tell us that, and he's going to take us through the process now. And I ask David now to start his video, please. David?
Okay, thank you very much, Helene. First of all, can I have confirmation that you can see my presentation? Can everybody see this?
It is coming, but I don't see it yet. Maybe
still loading.
It's loading. Still loading. Thank you, Bjorn.
There's a slight delay. Apologies for that. Looks like this presentation doesn't load as quick as we want.
Okay, so while David's presentation is loading, I can also tell the audience that David has already written 2 textbooks that are used in higher education. These are both based for management with quality management, and he's very passionate about the subject, and his students also indicated to us that they feel that David is very, very passionate and convey the message of quality management, not only in the 9,000, 14,000, as 50,000, but also now the 21,000 to them with great passion. Maybe, Magabu, can I ask that you load the presentation for David, please? Okay, David is coming on now. David, we can see your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helene. And once again, good morning, everybody who's joined this webinar. As you see, it's SANS 21001-2020, but the origin of this standard goes back many, many years. In fact, it first started off as an international workshop agreement. It was like a sort of fast-tracking the development of an ISO standard. That probably goes back about 12 years or so. And it was really promoted by countries such as Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, particularly now South American and Central American countries. ISO does not like the proliferation of standards. So for a standard like this one to be developed, there must have been very, very strong motivation. And there was strong motivation to have this developed. There's very few standards that are spin-offs from the ISO 9001 standard. There's one in the automotive field, there's one in the aeronautical field, there's one in the petrochemical field, but they're very few because of the stringent regulations that ISO has for them. And I'm very glad it went from international workshop agreement until the ISO standard, so everybody can benefit from this. And just as we heard just now, it's not only for universities, TVET colleges, schools, high schools, primary schools, but also for training departments within organizations whose prime focus is to develop the competencies of the workforce and the staff in their organizations. So looking at the relevance, and the second slide, there is a critical and continuous need for educational organizations to evaluate the degree to which they meet the requirements of learners and other beneficiaries. And when we talk about requirements of beneficiaries and learners, I remember it was quite a few years ago, it was the University of Wolverhampton, and they implemented ISO 9001, but before they could, they had to have a debate. Who were the beneficiaries? Who actually were their customers? And actually it took them 6 months to work it out, because it's not just the students, the learners, but it's also, what about the future employers? What about society at large? What about the people, the parents of those students? So there are many different beneficiaries from the education system. It's not just the person who's sitting in class and learning. And also it builds on the success of 9001. And if you're not familiar with ISO 9001, I'm pretty sure you are, it is the most popular of all the ISO management standards, of which there are 53. And there's something like over 1.5 million organizations worldwide that have not only implemented, but got certified by a third-party certification body as meeting the requirements. It's also estimated about another 1.5 million organizations that have implemented it just for the point of having a good system in place, and they never went the certification route. And some years ago, when I had the CFO of the Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund attend one of my courses on how to implement ISO 9001, and he wasn't there because he wanted the Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund to be certified to 9001. He just wanted a good management system, nothing more, nothing less. And his research showed him that these quality management system standards are simply a good management system standard, and it's there to benefit an organization. So 21001 specifies requirements for the management system for educational organizations when such an organization needs to demonstrate its ability to support the acquisition and development of competence through teaching, learning, or research. I think this is what Prof. Rampel said just now about in his background and what UNISA is doing is promoting that excellence. Also, it aims to enhance satisfaction of learners and other beneficiaries, as well as the staff. In fact, in one of the clauses in the standard, they talk about the psychosocial aspects of the learning environment, anti-bullying as an example, which is very particular for school children. So we are engaging in those type of aspects as well within the standard and within the management system. But all the requirements are generic. And if I compare the ISO 9001 standard, which is quite generic, it's not just for manufacturing or engineering companies, service organizations. In fact, my own company has been certified to ISO 9001 for many, many years. But it is very generic. But now, about 30% more in 21001 has been added to focus and shift the focus to these educational institutions. So they're tended to be applicable to any organization that uses a curriculum to support the development of competence through teaching, learning, or research, regardless of the type, size, or methods of delivery. Also, it can be applied to educational organizations within larger organizations. These are training departments within companies. You don't have, the whole organization doesn't have to go and implement 21001. It could be just one section of that organization that deals with training and development. The document does not apply to organizations that only produce or manufacture educational products. In other words, there must be an interaction with the learner, with the development of competency. And in fact, the term competency is also defined in the standard. But essentially, it's knowledge and skills, but most important, the ability to apply those knowledge and skills that are acquired. So looking at interested parties, who are the interested parties? And I say it's not just the student itself or the learner itself. There are many interested parties. So this is the typology of interested parties. Of course, primarily we first have the learners, which means we have the students. And they will be our primary interested party, and also being apprentices as well. So it goes right across the board. Secondly, other beneficiaries would be the government. Well, we want successful people to get employment. If people are employed, they pay taxes, and the government is happy. If they're not employed, no taxes are being paid, and the government is not happy, I think, as they are today. Is the labour market for fruitful employment. We want people who can actually function actively and positively within the labour market. And of course, parents and guardians, because often they invest a lot of time, money, effort in developing their children over time through primary, secondary, hopefully tertiary education, and they like to see the benefit of that. They like to see their children to be successful. Staff. The staff of these institutions are very important. So we talk about the employees, and it's not just the lecturer, facilitators, but administration departments, etc., and volunteers as well. Often there are many volunteers that help with the development of people learning and acquiring knowledge and skills. And then we have various other interested parties as well. And this would be educational organizations, such as the Department of Education, South African Qualifications Authority, SAQA, organizations like that, media and society. They are very interested in how educational organizations are functioning, being successful. External providers that provide knowledge, materials, facilities to educational organizations. Shareholders, we're seeing more and more the privatization of various primary, secondary, and tertiary organizations, private schools, private universities, and these have shareholders. Commercial partners, because as the students graduate, they often go into industry and commerce. We hope they go into industry and commerce. And we want a well-rounded product coming out of the universities that meet those commercial partners' requirements. And then alumni are often people who have studied and been successful at the organization, typically university, become part of the alumni, and often support those institutions further along the line. So there are many interested parties here. It's not just the first one, which is the students and the students alone. Looking at the potential benefits of this standard. First of all, it's a better alignment of objectives and activities with policy, including mission and vision. And one of the requirements is to have a policy for the organization, and the policy is an intention. And many times these quality policies do include the mission and the vision for that organization, because it's part and parcel of the way we do business. Also enhance social responsibility by providing inclusive and equitable quality education for all. More personalized learning and effective response to all learners, and particularly to learners with special education needs, distance learners, and lifelong learning opportunities. And I was reading in yesterday's paper about how more and more people, because of the pandemic, have become distance learners, and they're not looking forward to going back to school and or back to university. In fact, in many instances, they do very well if they have the discipline to work from home, and their marks have shown a significant increase. And consistent processes and evaluation tools to demonstrate and increase effectiveness and efficiency. Increase credibility of the organization. We read in the news media about these sort of fly-by-night colleges or schools. Then where's the credibility? How do they actually attract customers? And how do they get away with it as well? Also, it means that it enables educational organizations to demonstrate their commitment to effective educational management practices. What better indication than an educational organization, being a university, or even a faculty at a university, or even a department for that matter, or at a TVET college, or at a school, primary or secondary, that shows their commitment to the educational management by adopting ISO 21001 and using its guidelines as well as its requirements to prove that they are committed. And then a culture for organizational improvement, harmonization of regional, national, open priority, so propriety, and other standards within the international framework. So again, aligning with other organizations worldwide and partnering perhaps with different universities or other institutions, widen participation of interested parties, and even the stimulation of excellence and innovation. And one can say, well, be innovative, but it's not that easy. It needs to be stimulated. You can't demand people to be innovative. The standard is based on a number of principles. And the first one is to focus on learners and those other beneficiaries we talked about and discussed. The second principle is to have visionary leadership, engagement of people, which would be parents, customers, industry, commerce, as well as the students, staff members. Process approach. Well, there's nothing new about the process approach. In fact, almost 40 years ago, one of the quality gurus in America, his name was Philip Crosby, made the statement in 1981 that all work is a process and by no other way. And it is very true. When we started writing the 9001 standard, the current 9001 standard, that was in 2012, we started in St. Petersburg. That's the first thing the international community told us. We have to look at the process approach right throughout the whole standard. Course improvement is always ongoing. Evidence-based decisions. Too many decisions are based on thumbs up or in my experience, and things are constantly changing. So we need evidence. Relationship management, relationship of staff with the students, with the learners, relationship of staff between themselves and with higher organizations. Social responsibility, accessibility and equity, ethical conduct and education, and even data security and protection. And we do have such as the POPI Act, which helps us on that. So let's have a quick look at what does the standard look like. And I've got what I call a helicopter view of the standard. And it does follow the late Dr. Deming's PDCA, which he established some 60 years ago. And that's what plan, do, check, act, cycle. And if we look at the first clauses of under plan, this is in the green, context of the organization. What challenges do we have? What's the scope of our system? What is the management systems for the educational organizations? Leadership and leadership and commitment. And there, I remember with the 9001, I was on the committee that wrote clauses 4 and 5. We debated quite vigorously about the word accountability, because who's accountable for the effectiveness of this management system? And that's top management. It is their system. We have a policy, and then who's to do what, where, when, under organizational roles. Planning. Actions to address risks and opportunities. There's risks in everything we do. And the second we open our eyes in the morning until the time we get to work and throughout the whole day, we all have risks. And then our educational organization objectives, which essentially are business objectives related to what we're doing. And how do we establish them and how to achieve them? And then planning and changes. And then under resources, as I said, even the psychosocial aspects and resources, the infrastructure, the environment in which we work. Competence, do we have competent people? And how do we define that competence? As I said, knowledge, skills, ability to apply. Awareness, is everybody aware of the system? Communication, and also what documentation do we need? You certainly don't want to over-document, but we don't want to under-document our system. And there's a new guideline coming next year on that, which is ISO 10013. Then we get to doing the job, from planning and control right through to actually doing the job, which is in clause 8.5 there, and then making sure students or learners go out with the right knowledge, skills, competencies. And if something does go wrong, how do we control that? And make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's linked to something we find under ACT. Performance evaluation. Well, at what stages do we monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate whether we're doing the right things in the right way and getting the right outputs or outcomes from that? And we carry out internal audits. The old saying, what gets measured gets done. That's why any of these management systems work, is because we carried out internal audits as to seeing how effective our systems are working and how can we improve. And then management review, where management needs to review because top management is accountable for the management system. And then ACT, how can we do better next time? So linked from 8.7, we have 10.1, which is non-conformity and corrective action. And corrective action being finding the root cause of the problem to make sure it never happens again. And then our ongoing continual improvement. And then we always look for opportunities for improvement. And again, that could include innovation. Also, right at the back of the standard, we have an annexure. And these annexures give us further guidance, such as additional requirements for early childhood education, principles for the for the environmental organization management system. The ones that I've given you just now, but there they talk about it, exactly what is the principle and how to apply that principle and the intent of that principle. Also, classification of interested parties in educational organizations, such as the diagram I just showed you. Guidelines for communication with interested parties, processes, measures, tools in educational organizations, example of mapping to regional standards, and then health and safety consideration for educational organizations, which I think with the pandemic, that must be quite a hot spot that schools are struggling with at the moment. So that's giving you a broad overview of what this standard's about. Of course, there's a lot more detail in them. But if we just see it as simply a good management system, and nothing more and nothing less, and that is beneficial, it's not as punishment sent by somebody, but it's a benevolent system, and it does have a positive effect on the bottom line. Yes, universities, colleges, schools are not there to make money, but however, if you're more efficient, you can do more with what you save and expand and give a better quality service because you're far more efficient. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward later in the webinar for any questions. Over to you, Helene.
Thank you very, very much, David. This has really been insightful, and I think many people has learned that continuous circle is never finished until you've done the evaluation at the end of the day, because otherwise it will not, you will only do the implementation of what you've done and never move forward, because what if once you've implemented, you must re-evaluate and actually see, is it going to need further intervention? Very important, and I believe suitably catered for educational institutions. Thank you then for David, our chairperson from our South African Bureau of Standards TC 176. I now have the privilege to introduce one of the users of the standards, but also one of our committee members, Prof. Roy Rampal, that is going to give us the benefits of the SANS 21001 for organizational institutions. Prof. Roy Rampal is a professor at UNISA. He's at the Business School of Leadership. Prof. Roy has conducted research on quality and has done many papers and publications on quality and accreditation, and is a seasoned speaker and attendee of various on various platforms, and he is also a member of the Institute of Directors, and then further he's a member of SAQA, he is a member of SATCA, he's been the chairperson of the and the national president of SASQ, the Southern African Society of Quality, over the past 5 years. So certainly is a esteemed person to have in our presence today. I hand over to you now, Prof. Roy.
Thank you very much, Gillian. I just want to confirm you can see the slides.
We can see the slides. You can start.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning all and welcome once again. And I'm going to just give you a little bit more regarding the benefits and what the system can do for you. And I also thank David for laying the foundation to this presentation. Okay, the first thing is about ISO 9000. When you speak normally to an academic, they actually associate ISO 9000 with manufacturing even up to today. And that is because normally standards give you a kind of a perception and gives you a kind of a philosophy, and I'm just running through the different versions here. 1987 was the first edition of ISO 9001, and this was very well suited for manufacturing, so that's where it all started, that this is a manufacturing standard. In 1994, the second edition went to emphasize a little bit more on quality assurance, and in 2000, they went very strong on process management, something that David had alluded to just now, and also to try and get alignment with service organizations. In 1987 and 1994 standards were not appropriate for service organizations. In 2008, they provided more clarity of the clauses, hoping that service organizations could adopt this as well, having more clarity. But the big breakthrough came in with the 2015 standard, where it went on to a different mode altogether. It went on to risk-based thinking and took a very strong focus on plan, do, check, act cycle. And also at the same time, they structured this on what we call a high-level structure. Now, the high-level structure has 10 clauses, which is aligned with most standards. So harmonizing of standards could be promoted on a high-level structure. Recently, and as much as what David alluded to, that they went many, many years ago, they looked at language, because one of the issues with a ISO standard and language at the university, or language in the academic world or the teaching and learning world, is very, very different. Even when it comes to understanding what is accreditation and certification, they mean different things in different kind of these sectors. So they looked at language, they looked at students and beneficiaries. You know, in terms of customer focus, the biggest challenge at universities or educational institutions was defining who was the real customer. And because of that, that was one of the reasons where the ISO 9000 was not popular, was because the customer focus really, or the customer definition, was problematic. They added in social responsibility, health and safety, curriculum design and controls, assessment design, and information and communication management. So they added all this over and above the 9001, which is the 2015 9001, and they created this 21001, which is not just a quality management system. Actually, it's a system that manages an organization. It's called a management systems for educational organizations. So we need to clarify that it's not the ISO 9001 that looks at quality standard, but this is a management standard. Now, this thing works across any kinds of educational institutes. It works on a multi-context in terms of preschools, primary, secondary schools, high school, colleges, training centers, you name it. It looks at formal teaching, informal teaching, private schools, public schools, and basically, this standard is comes into play where there's learners, there's an institution involved, there's a curriculum, and there's beneficiaries. End of the day, if you have those four components, then ISO 20, well, I should say now SANS 21001 will suit the purpose. The philosophy then becomes looking at learners, labor market, government in terms of requirements and seeing to what extent institutions are satisfying learners, government, and labor markets. Now, we need to just take a view on what our challenges are in the education sector. First of all, we have increasing expectations. We all know about fees must fall. We all know about universities have to give better accountability. And remember, universities talk more about accountability than responsibility. And also, we have the case where funding is dropping. It's difficult to find money to study. And also on the same side, people and students study and graduate, cannot find job opportunities, etc. So there's a huge cry and expectations, and just not from students. It's about us as professors, it's about lecturers, it's about examiners, it's about even the deans at school, etc. So no matter where you are in the supply chain, as long as you're in education, there's increasing expectations. There's also a very strong voice now from students, and we need to become more and more student focused, especially when we talk about inclusivity, diversity, engagement. In fact, the CHE is talking about how we bring in the voice of the students into the governance of universities or institutions. Parents, student retention is another focus area, alumni, and most of all, we need to look at enhancing student experience. That's the first thing that we need to do is enhance student experience, because if it's not getting a good experience, it doesn't mean he's going to be a successful student. Competence and retention of educators is another challenge. You know, many, if you look at the Sunday's paper, you'll see many universities apply advertising for academics, for teachers, for reviewers, examiners. There's always a short supply of that, and institutions need to know how do we improve competency of them, how you retain them, and how you keep them as long as possible in the system so that they can provide services for lifelong learning. Legislation and policies, we all know, is changing all the time. In fact, our education systems have legislation and policies changing all the time, so we're always in a flux of change. Quality of education, there's always a call for that from governments, from universities, from controlling bodies, from SACWA. All these bodies are always calling about how are you improving education. Also looking at saying, how do we reduce costs? How do we look at financial viability? How do we make the quality of education so good so when somebody leaves an institution with a qualification that they can automatically slot into a job? Standardization of practices. You know, education is one of those areas where even at a university, there's good practices, bad practices, and all over an institution, and that needs to be captivated into what we call a standardized set of practices. Provision of resources is another area that is a big challenge for universities, especially in the ICT space. For example, now with the COVID pandemic, how many institutions have actually went into themselves in a panic mode to get themselves organized with ICT? There's venues, there's pastoral care. Something that we always forget is, what is the pastoral care to the student? What is the pastoral care of a learner? How do we take care of emergencies? And those things are normally left out, and those are challenges. Managing changes in technology. As you know, technology is changing every day, by the minute, all the time. a new technology today becomes an old technology tomorrow. So how do we adapt for these things? Fourth industrial revolution, the whole academic area or sector, the whole education sector is talking about fourth industrial revolution. How do we get there? Data integrity is another big issue. How do we retain data? How do we capture data? And we'll talk a little bit more about that, about its importance. A lot of institutions are talking about smart campus. This seems to be a big challenge in terms of understanding a smart campus and how do we get there? What is the issues and what processes, what policies, etc. we use to get there? Now, if we implemented these outcomes, and these are just projected benefits for us, student engagement. Student engagement is becoming a very big issue, and I just spoke just now, is about having the voice of the student, not only in the classroom, but in the management of an education institution. Better alignment of objectives and activities with policies, with the way the standard rolls itself in terms of monitoring, in terms of evaluation, in terms of assessment, in terms of improvement. One will see at the end of the day there's consistent view of objectives and making sure that it is aligned with policy. Social responsibility is also taken into the standard, especially making it inclusive and equitable for quality education, also promoting innovation, creation, and co-creation of knowledge. That's another agenda we need to look at, is creation and co-creation of knowledge. Lecturers are no more the best person to lecture anymore, because sometimes the student knows more than the lecturer. So we have to change our modus operandi and capture the new knowledge that's coming from students. Consistent processes and evaluation tools. The standard has quite a lot of them in terms of assessment tools, how to do an assessment tool, how to put a curriculum together. So the standard dictates that. Increased accountability and credibility of the educational organization. This gives you, because it's an international standard, because it's supposed to be also known nationally, and it's supposed to be on par with, in terms of its certification with peer organizations, one will expect that there's going to be a lot of accountability and credibility of the organization just by getting the label of SANS 21001. Culture of the organization will change. Harmonization of all the standards that are floating around can be brought into the standard. The one slide that Dr. Bishun had shared, where there was a lot of standards that are now captivated as SANS standards. It's all, each one of the standards can be brought in here somewhere. The main thing is also it gives us academics to start thinking about systems, start thinking about processes, start thinking about how we innovate, how we go into excellence, how we are effective and how effective is the organization to the learner. And above all is to be compliant and also with a high degree of accountability. This is very, very exploratory. I don't know if colleagues in the higher education will know that the Council of Higher Education is looking at a new quality assurance framework, which is the QAF, has been sent around already for comment. And we just took a little snapshot and did an exploratory analysis of that QAF with the SANS 21001. And these were context of organization in terms of the standard meets what the QAF is saying about university context. The leadership aspect reflects on, again, on institutional responsibility, accountability, quality promotion, stakeholders, stakeholder focus. So all these things are in the new framework. Planning, again, a thing like enrollment planning is part of the QAF. Again, it falls under planning in 21001. Student support is a big area in the QAF, and again, that is covered in the 21001. Operation, quality promotion, teaching and learning, research, and community engagement processes, information management in the QAF is articulated under operation in the standard. We talk about internal quality assurance, external quality assurance, review cycle monitoring and evaluation. It's again partners with performance evaluation in 21001. Quality enhancement, quality improvement, benchmarking, quality improvement plans. Again, it's part of improvement in 21001. Now, what we are saying here is there are a lot of the parts of the QAF, the new CHE QAF, that can be aligned with 21001. So if an organization is implementing 21001, it's actually also in a way covering many of the requirements in the QAF. Again, what the 21001 will promote and as required in the QAF is about national standards. It's about codes of practice and standards and guidelines. Universities will need to develop codes of practice and standards and guidelines across the faculties, in the faculties, across universities, and this can be promoted with national standards. And the opportunity is that academia can start creating its own standards with the kind of structures that the South African Bureau of Standards has. So that's an opportunity there. External quality assurance, again, that what is required by the QAF, and that can be adopted or reviewed looking at a certification of 21001. They require a quality management system. The foundation on which the 21001 will operate will be some kind of a quality system. The other requirement of the QAF, he says, higher educational institutes should take ownership of the quality development, assurance, improvement, and quality enhancement. Now that is a big change in the modus operandi of the CHE, because they want to hand over ownership of quality to the universities, and they need to take what partly they have been doing, and this can be adopted and seen from an external agency as a certification of ISO 21001. So there is opportunities, and these are very, very exploratory, as I said, and one will need to go deeper into these things as we proceed. Now, we mustn't also forget about our road to excellence and where ISO, or where the 21001 standard fits in. My recommendation and the way I view it, the 21001 should be the foundation of an institution on which good management practices and quality practices operate. These also supports other accreditations. Many institutions have other kinds of accreditations that can be brought in and can be adopted much easily if they have the systems running on 21001, because most of the things or the areas that are required for accreditations are covered by the 21001. And then even when you proceed further after getting your other accreditations in terms of road for excellence, all the knowledge and the foundations developed in 21001 will match to what is required for excellence. Now, the challenges and opportunities we have going forward is basically, I won't say challenges, but as well as opportunities, is we need to develop a working group, including academics, with SABS as the certification or certifying body. Review auditing procedures to include peer reviewing procedures. This is one of the things that institutions or educational institutions, especially the universities, sometimes do not like the word audit. So we need to have some kind of a system, and we're going to use David's knowledge on the 19011 to develop some kind of peer reviewing mechanisms into those standards and into that profession. And it's a big opportunity for academics to start engaging and publishing and teaching and in this area of this new standard. I would just like to thank Dr. Bissoon and his team at SABS for taking interest in this standard, and also to make me feel part of it, and also to actually now see movement in the standard. We've been having a lot of talk around it for the past 6-7 months, but now I can see it really taking shape, and we are going to create momentum. Mr. David Staples, the director of TQIMS, thank you very much, and I think his involvement is crucial from both the academic side as well as his involvement in developing standards. Other colleagues that are involved in terms of our, what we call our advisory group, is Prof. Makashwa, who's the Director of Quality Assurance and Enhancement at UNISA, and Dr. Randall Janis, who is the NMMU Business School Director, but as well as he is the Chairman of the South African Business Schools Association that looks after the MBA programs for this country. With that, I just want to ask Ms. Helene if I can present a short video of 5 minutes, or are we out of time? May I ask you, Helene?
Thank you very much, Prof. Roy. We are actually running a bit late, but I think the members of the audience will benefit from this short video, so you may proceed.
I just want to check with you, Helene, is the sound coming through?
Roy, it's not coming through. We are not seeing the video yet. I'm going to start with the introduction of...
Okay.
Okay, it's coming. It's coming. There we go. We don't hear the sound. We don't hear the sound.
I think I'll have to skip this.
Okay, we can skip that, and then we can run it after the summary. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. I would just like to thank Prof. Roy for his giving us the benefits, and he only highlighted the benefits to us. Remember, for every institution, there could be more benefits, and especially if you now look at from the eyes of a TVET college or a tertiary institution, you might actually find other benefits for yourself. So we thank Prof. Roy, and I'm going to do, with any further ado, move to the moderated summary, and I'm going to ask Prof. Humphrey Mogshau to actually do this for us. And he's an associate professor from UNISA. He has been with an academic for more than 25 years, and he has taught at the University of KZN as well as UNISA, which he joined in 2000. And from 2010 to 2015, he has been the head of the quality assurance in the College of Human Science. And since last year, 2019, he's been the director of academic quality assurance and enhancement in the office of the Vice President, Teaching and Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support. Prof. Humphrey, can I please ask that you do a moderated summary for us?
Thank you so much, Ms. Staples, for the introduction, and also for this opportunity to participate in this seminar. Much appreciated. In doing my short summary here, I'm going to highlight a few things. I would like to start first by just indicating that the theme and the focus of the program was very clear, and it helped one to really know where we are heading to in terms of also having a bigger picture where we are heading as a country in terms of national standards. I would like to start first by commenting and appreciating Dr. Bassoon. I realized that let me just highlight just a few pointers he mentioned, and one aspect that I think I found missing in his presentation, although I'm not supposed to comment on his, but on the other two speakers. Firstly, I found the background about the role of the SABS very, very informative. Secondly, I found that the over 300 technical subcommittees that the SABS is working with is an impressive work, and is highly commendable. And then thirdly, also that standards are not regulations. I found that a very important point. And then fourthly, the issue of the role of experts to contribute in the standards. I found that also very, very important. And then also the last point I can mention, because there are many points, but to save time, is the issue of the development process. I found it to be very clear and very informative, and it also takes one by the hand throughout the whole process. In one aspect that I think I found missing in Dr. Bassoon's presentation is when he was talking about the different bodies, political bodies and continental and international bodies. I did not see, he mentioned BRICS, the United Nations. I thought I missed the African Union, the engagement with the African Union. It will be interesting to hear where's the engagement with the African Union, with the SABS. Then let me come to Mr. Stables. There are 2 or 3 highlights I would like to mention from his address. And let me also share with all the listeners on this program right now that the reason why I did not prepare a written summary or moderation is because I wanted to really listen to what the speakers, they are going to elaborate on their points, because I've seen what is written. Yes, it was clear, but I wanted to also hear how they are going to elaborate, because they may share more info that is not in the slides. So I found in the presentation of Mr. Stables that we mentioned the issue of meeting the requirements of learners and beneficiaries is a very, very important point. And also I would like to complement it with what the Council of Higher Education is doing as a regulatory body. The Council of Higher Education is very clear that we really need to meet the requirements for learners and the beneficiaries, but primarily for the learners. And then there's another aspect which I found very interesting in the address by Mr. Stables, is the issue of the interested parties. While you were speaking about the interested parties, there's something I think I found missing. He mentioned all the many parties and the government, labor market, the parents. However, I think I found the issue of community engagement missing, because according to our government, the role of higher education, as explained in the Higher Education Act of 1997, is very clear. It's got 3 pillars. It's teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. So I found the issue of community engagement missing in his presentation. And then another aspect that I found missing in his presentation is when he was mentioning, talking about the management principles of EOMS, is the issue of epistemic ideology. We have to be upfront. All teaching has got epistemic ideology from where it starts. So I found that missing in his address. And then that covers Mr. Stables. Then let me come to the last one, Professor Ramphal. Yes, Professor Ramphal spoke about the education, the benefits of SANS and the educational institutions, the background. He shared the issue of language. Then let me highlight some of the issues that I found missing in his address. The first one, I think, Prof. Ramphal, I found you to come short of mainstreaming quality within the higher education institutions. That's number one. Two, the location of quality within the higher education institutions. Often quality in many of the higher education institutions is not located in one of the executive offices. Executive offices, I mean top executive of the university, like the vice principals. That also I found that you were not very upfront, because quality should not be an add-on in educational institution. Is the core business, is part of the core business of what higher education and educational institutions are about. Then another aspect that I found missing in your address, Prof. Ramphal, is the orientation of university staff about the role of the SABS. I think that is very important. The SABS is doing amazing work. Having listened to what Dr. Bassoon shared, I think this information needs to, I will use the word, I think to borrow it from the political spaces, it needs to be massified. It needs to be known by as many as possible, especially all teachers and academics in the higher education field, because those are experts, as Dr. Bassoon mentioned, the role of experts. And then the fact that he said the SABS does the issue of standards, but it's not the regulatory, it does not enforce, then that's why it's so important that we now get also another angle to this issue, engagement with the Council of Higher Education, because that's the body that does the enforcement in the higher education field, especially in the universities. Then the last point I would like to share with all of us present is the issue of the working group, especially to get the feedback and engagement from as many higher education institutions as possible. We know the history of higher education in the country, whereby some of the universities are so-called historically disadvantaged institutions. It will be good to get as much feedback from as many of the different higher education institutions into the current work that is taking place, and the SANS and the educational institutions input that Prof. Ramphal and Mr. Stables, their presentations were on. On that note, that's a short comment and a short feedback, and I hope those aspects that I highlighted are missing, the colleagues will engage on them. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very, very much, Prof. Humphrey. And I think a comprehensive feedback for us. And I would like Dr. Bassoon to then, if he can do the first answer for us. I think the members of the panel can now switch on their cameras, and then we can look at them for discussion. Okay, Dr. Bassoon on the AU.
Thank you, Helene. And yeah, it's a very important question, but maybe I didn't articulate the clarity based on the timelines that we had for the presentation. Certainly, the AU is a very important stakeholder in this entire support to the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the African Union, basically representatives of the African Union are the member states. And so from the perspective of South Africa, ideally it will be the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, who are one of the key stakeholders, who are stakeholders of the African Union. So we are the subcategory, meaning the technical infrastructure within DTI that participates at the ARSO level. Now, the reason I say ARSO level and AFSEC is because ARSO, which is the African Organization for Standardization, has been established in 1977 by the African Union. Formerly, it was the Organization for African Unity, I think, and now referred to as the African Union. So the African Union plays a significant role in the activities of ARSO, which is the regional standards body. And one of the fundamental objectives of ARSO is to harmonize African continental standards, which is referred to as ARS, rather African regional standards. So we do play a role, not necessarily a direct role, an indirect role through the Department of Trade and Industry to the African Union, and secondly, in our role with ARSO in developing of regional standards, we indirectly play a role in the stakeholder engagement with the African Union as well. I just wanted to highlight also that the African Continental Free Trade Area, that entire agreement signed and ratified by the member states, has an annexure, and that annexure defines very clearly the role of ARSO and AFSEC in support of the implementation of the African Continental Area, African Continental Free Trade Area. So we might not have a direct engagement with the African Union because there's a very diverse range of directorates as well, but we do play a very influential role in ARSO and AFSEC, which support the harmonization of standards in the region. Thank you. I trust it provides the clarity.
Thank you very much, Sadhvir. I would like then to ask David on the community engagement when we look at the SANS 21001 as well as the EOMS.
Okay, thank you very much, Helene. First of all, the whole point of the presentation was looking at the standard itself. And remember, standards are generic, which means that they have to be accepted by all nations. In fact, for any standard to be published by ISO, the minimum is 75% thumbs up. So it's not any country specific. But the term society would cover that community engagement, because what else is society? It's a society at large. But like I said, there may have been things that were, or some things that were missing. However, the focus was on what is the standard and what is ISO 21001. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I would like then to go to Prof. Roy and just giving us a bit of background on the mainstream and the location of quality, and what you're going to do as UNISA to actually set an example. What is your plan forward to learn more about the SABS, the processes, and know that we are also there to help you with that?
Thank you, Ali. I think that quality cannot run from an office. I think quality has to run with the people on the ground. And I think that we are busy doing that at UNISA, that we have all our quality assurance practitioners empowering people to run quality as best as they could and to actually own quality. So quality does not run from the quality assurance office and from a quality manager's office. So we are busy trying to take that, and I think Prof. Makoshwa has alluded to that, is something that we are really doing. As far as the relationships go with SABS, I can say confidently that UNISA has a MOU with SABS, and that MOU is housed at the School of Business Leadership, and we have worked together on a number of issues, a number of platforms, or jointly, and we have created qualifications that talk to standards. We have actually produced one doctorate candidate on standards. We've got 2 more registered studying the doctorates in standards. So we are very much at the SBL located, and in terms of standards, we have a research focus area at the SBL in terms of business standards. And we're developing that in terms of also seeing if NRF can fund that later and fund a research chair for that. But I also take the point that Prof. Makoshwa is probably thinking is that is not enough, you know. We need to go down to different universities. We have tried that. We have even tried to have the academic forum with SABS, which we are really trying to relaunch. We just waited for this event. So I think there's many opportunities for researchers. Many years ago, the SABS was running like a cocoon in the sense that they didn't have many academics working, you know, outside the field rather than they were inside the field. And many of them worked as SABS employees rather than academics. But now it's changed, and we're working as one kind of partnership arrangement, or working as partners. We collaborate, and we're doing many things in terms of that. And we hope that Prof. Makoshwa will also, in his portfolio, expand this to other parts of UNISA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Roy. I would like to, from the SABS side, acknowledge the fact that we will invite more people to the working groups and the technical committees, and we take to heart that there are institutions that are not always having the funds available to actually start to join without getting a little bit of support. And maybe we can look at the bigger academic institutions and say, look after your brothers and sisters and bring with you somebody from a academical institution that can benefit for you to mentor and bring into the technical committee and to be part of the working group that develops standards in this this field of quality, especially for educational institutions. I would just then ask Prof. Roy, if you are ready with the video, because I'm going to do the thanks, and then we can maybe look at the video.
Yeah, I think we are running a little bit out of time, so
okay,
let's
sure.
continue the program,
Okay.
I would like to. Any other questions from the listeners?
Okay, we've got from the listeners. We've got from Mr. Clifton Singh, who is asking, should an organization like UNISA or a GSBL decide to embark on the SANS ISO 21001 certification journey, what steps should be followed by the institution who will be the independent body to conduct audits and assess compliance? Mr. Singh, this question, I believe, can be answered not only by our executive, but by anybody in the room. But I'm going to ask our executive to answer it, and we will give you a written reply as well. Sadhbir, to you.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Helene. So, yeah, it's important to go through a step-by-step process. The first thing that you need to do is get access to the standard. The second one is to really understand the principles of the standard. The third is to ensure that you have a resource team capacitated to implement the standard, and implementation of the standard, as quite rightly pointed out by Prof. Rampal and Mr. Dave Stables, that it has to get a seniority and top management and leadership commitment to embark on this. It is not an individual sitting in a corner as a quality office to drive this. It will fail the moment you start. So you need to make sure that there is a strategic priority to ensure that you want to utilize a standard, implement the standard for a particular vision that you want to determine as an objective for your organization. So acquiring the standard, top management leadership, which are basically one of the principles, implementation of the standard, self-declaration of the standard, or prior to self-declaration, you want to do and mature the system. You want to embed that system into the organization. You can self-declare, and if you want to go the certification route, so there are a number of certification bodies that will obviously start going into the space of providing certification activities to the standard, including the SABS. So the SABS is an accredited, SANS accredited certification body, and my understanding is that the certification body is looking towards being accredited towards 21001. And SABS could be one of many certification bodies as accredited by SANS to provide the independent certification activities and to come in to do the audits and make sure that you comply and maintain compliance for the longevity of that standard. So I trust that answers the question. There are other questions as well, Helene, which maybe you can give the other colleagues an opportunity to answer or comment further on this particular question, but there are other questions that I've seen as well. Thanks.
So, yes, I would like to just go through some of the other questions. Yes, we will share the slides. If you also, for this specific question, if you share your email address with us, if it's not the one that you registered with, then you can and you ask a specific question regarding certification or more information. We will be able to come back to you. To the public, yes, they are. They're either on the SABS website, which you can www.sabs and then you click on the web store and you are able to buy an e-copy of that standard, and it's basically instantly that you can. There's also a walk-in service that you can walk into the SABS to actually purchase the standard. Further to that, Gemotso from Masita said the entity ISO 9001 certified. Can the standard be integrated with other standards such as quality and health? Yes, there is integrated certification that you can do, and integrated assessments that can be done. We can put you in contact with our certification as well. We will do that. How do we get copies of the teaching standard guidelines mentioned by, I believe it was David mentioned it. I don't know if you would like to just come in on that, David.
Yeah, exactly what was the question about a teaching guideline? Because I don't remember exactly the point.
Okay.
I think if I can come in there. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Prof. Roy?
I think Dr. Sadhvir alluded to teaching standards. You know how to teach standards. It's an ISO magazine that can be downloaded for free from the ISO Focus website.
Oh yes, okay. That is all about the standards development, and that is correct. The teaching of standards. Okay, so from the ISO website, but we will also give you a email reply on this. Who would be the accredited body certified the education of standards? As Sadhvir has alluded, it can be one of many, but when you do go out there, and choose a institution to do your accreditation. Make sure that it is a SANS accredited institution, because otherwise at the end of the day you might be accredited by or certified by a body that is not does not have accreditation, and you might find that your certificate is lacking when two companies are compared. The service providers will always choose to use a accredited body. The standards currently available for sale, I think that one we've answered already. And we have a couple of people acknowledging the great work that our presenters has done. Can you advise of the recording? Yes, it will be made available right after the meeting. Thank you, Prof, for the alignment presentation. So again, thank you very much. And what is the question here is, are there any engagement with Umalusi? So if Prof can answer that.
Yes, basically we have already engaged with the CHE in our exploratory work. We are going to engage with Umalusi. It's just that we're trying to secure a meeting with them. So yes, that is definitely on the cards.
Okay, Lerati from NMISA, she says, does SAB's representative sit at PACI meetings, or it happens through ARSO and AFSEC? I think that is already it happens through ARSO and AFSEC, but they very often, if South Africa is the most knowledgeable person in the area, in the African region, then it will be a South African representative that actually represents ARSO or AFSEC in that meeting at PACI. So yes, we've certainly been there, and but it will be via the two regional bodies. Thank you, Fran, for putting the link already on for us. And then we, I think the last question then, does SAB's representative sit at, oh, you've actually re-asked that question for AU purposes. I believe it is so, true, yes, it will be for African regional purposes. Sadhvir, yes?
Brilliant, thanks. So maybe I just want to comment on this. I think it's a very important point, colleague from NMISA. So just PACI, what does PACI mean? PACI is the Pan-African Quality Infrastructure. It comprises of the 4 regional technical infrastructure, or rather 5 institutions, ARSO, AFSEC, the equivalent from a regional perspective in terms of metrology, and that is AfriMets, and the equivalent of the accreditation bodies in the region, which is AFREC. So all these are the 4 regional bodies that participate and have formed an institution as PACI. So SABS has the opportunity, if we have a leadership position through ARSO, to be represented at PACI. And so the opportunity resides, so too with NMISA and SANS as well. I'm very well aware that NMISA and SANS plays an active leadership role at PACI as well. But as much as we might not have an official seat at PACI, we play a very influential role in AFSEC and ARSO, and our influences are taken through to the PACI table for discussion. That's the clarity I want to provide. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sadhvir. And I also then would like to start to say thank you to all of our presenters of today. I would like to say thank you to David, not only for speaking today, but also for leading the group that published the SANS 21001 or 21001, and David has been with the committee for a long time. He is inspired, he's given us great knowledge, and today again, you realize that he knows a lot about the standard, and he can actually teach us, any one of us, a lot in the room. I would like to thank Prof. Roy for his insight, especially from higher education, and for those people that do postgraduate, and what the institutions are going to do to move forward. And then thank you very much for Prof. Humphrey for giving us the summary, to actually bring the questions to the table, to start the conversation flowing. Thank you, Prof. Humphrey. And then to my executive, Sadhvir, that made himself available today to lead us and to tell everybody about the great work that SABS is continuing from day to day and for the last 75 years. Thank you, Sadhvir, for making time for us in your diary as well. And I then declare this event closed. And if Prof. Roy wants to play his video, I give him opportunity to do that.
Okay, I'll just try it once more.
Thank you.
Is it on the screen?
It's on the screen.
I just can't find the sound button. Where was the sound button again?
It's when just before you go in. I think what we can do, Prof. Roy, is we can actually send the video together with the presentation. We can add the video to them. And then for everybody, one of the attendees, thank you for joining, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Helene.
Thank you, Helene.